And our next panel discussion is on women in tech, tech titans. Let's welcome our panelists on stage. Up first, please welcome Ms. Arundhati Bhattacharya, Chairperson and CEO, Salesforce, India and South Asia. Ms. Ipsita Dasgupta, SVP and MD, HP India, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. And Ms. Devina Mehra, Founder, Chairperson and MD, First Global. It's a pleasure. Welcome. To navigate through this discussion, I would like to welcome Rukmini Rao, Consulting Editor, Fortune India, to please join us on stage.
It's wonderful to have all of you here with us today. Perhaps to start this discussion, we cannot escape AI today. It's become omnipresent, all-pervasive. Given that it's changing the way organizations are working today, and the leadership and impact on leadership as well. So from each of you, perhaps what I want to understand, perhaps I will start with you, Arundhati. As a leader in the tech industry, what does it take to prepare the organization for such a tectonic shift and you know, the changes that is required within a leader to navigate this and take the institution through?
First of all, thank you. That's actually a question that we face every single day because yes, it is a tectonic shift, and as one of the panelists just mentioned in the earlier panel, it's a fact that AI has become all pervasive. It's also a fact that this is the first time you have seen technology really getting democratized, and therefore it's an opportunity that all of us must avail of. Now, how does leadership need to change? First and foremost, I think leadership itself needs to walk the talk, meaning how comfortable are we? How AI fluent are we? That is something that we need to really and truly sort of model for the rest of the organization to follow. The second thing I think that what leadership needs to do is to actually ensure that their employees are more curious than apprehensive. Apprehension is something that makes them stay away. You want them to lean in. And the best way of getting them to lean in is to make them curious. So you need to be able to reward those people who are leaning in, who are curious, who are wanting to do stuff with AI. And believe me, when they see this happening with various groups, the energy automatically transmits itself across the organization. So I think, you know, on where leadership is concerned, the main job of the leadership is to ensure that people understand that learning is a lifelong process, change is constant, and neither of these two should become a chore. Neither of these two should be something that is holding you back. If you can, you know, put in that kind of energy in your employees, then more or less you have the problem solved.
Ipsita, also given the pace at which, you know, AI is evolving, the speed that is required, maybe in the mindset for a leader to change. So how do you adjust, and especially when large organizations, you know, they're big, you know, parts to move in the organization. How do you sort of, you know, navigate that?
It's a great question. You know, I'm going to start with something that almost sounds contradictory to what we're talking about, which is, I think we've almost gone too far to say everything is about AI all the time. I was refreshingly in an entire week of conversations around leading global businesses, and for the first time in many, many weeks, AI was mentioned only in very, very sort of segmented periods of time. And so I think first, the recognition for people that AI is going to make things more and more intuitive. The fear of technology, actually, AI works for it more than against it, because the ability to interact the way you would interact naturally is the whole point of AI. And so I think one of the things that we need to kind of educate and talk about on a continuous basis is that AI is about making things as intuitive as it possibly can be, to the point where, as you rightly said, things are moving so fast, you almost should make decisions about where and what you're going to engage on, because you're actually going to have to make some sorts of some sorts of assumptions around what will not exist in a period of time that you're learning and then having to unlearn again. Having said that, studies that have been done have shown that where in the West, most people think of AI as something that's going to replace them, the young in India think of AI as something that's going to serve them. And I think we need to lean into that as well, because the optimism that has come with AI in the country, I'm starting to see it wane a little bit. And I think we need to sort of bring it back to what it can really be. For the person who's using AI in just in a sort of interactive way, whether it's a ChatGPT or a Gemini or Copilot, I often tell my teams, think about it as interacting with a really smart person. You still have to guide the person. You still have to do everything else that you need to do surrounding what that person is telling you. But how intelligently you're able to input or ask that person is going to drive what you get in return from them.
Sure. Devina, in the fund management space, really interested to know how this has been a game changer, and especially in the investment theses or evolving your own assumptions. How has that changed the entire scenario?
Well, actually, we started using artificial intelligence and machine learning before this whole LLM boom came. So AI in various forms has been around a long time. I mean, it was, if you remember, there was this DeepSeek computer of IBM that defeated the world chess champion at that time. So it goes back as far back as that. I think that was in the late 90s or early 2000s. And in fact, I started my PMS only once I had that system, what we call a human plus machine system. Simply because, I mean, I had the PMS license for a good 20 years, you'd be surprised, before I launched, because I said, I cannot buy stocks based on my whims and fancies. There has to be some system which gives you some predictability, some forecastability, some consistency. But human beings are also required. And in our case, in the case of fund management, there are now the power to compute is huge, and that actually brings a risk, because you can literally test thousands of factors. And when that happens, you will always find spurious correlations. So something that looks as if it can predict how the stock or the market will move, but that's a spurious correlation. So, I mean, there are like multiple sort of checks you have to do as a human being. So the best part is if you can marry your expertise into a system. People tell me that, do machine learning systems work? I said, if I ask you, is a financial model made in Excel good or bad? You'll say, that's an absurd question. That's only a tool. What are you putting into it? And it's the same with machine learning also. So these are all tools, but you have to use them very sensibly. Otherwise, you can really get, I mean, what technically is called overfitting, but basically you go into the spurious correlation bit. That's only one thing. And also, there are many places where the human being is required, because without the human being, you don't know about the pandemic, you don't know about the geopolitics. So there are many things which get left out if it is a purely a pure model in a totally technology-first kind of way. So you need both arms of that.
Arundhati, if you're just talking about the entire SaaS story with relation to AI, a lot has been written about the death of SaaS, the same way people talk about the Indian IT services, all doomsday scenario. In your own sense, especially when it comes to a company like Salesforce, the kind of transformation that it takes to move to the next chapter of the way software does work. Some understanding and insights into what went into that entire change of probably navigating this and making a product relevant in the AI age.
Yeah. So basically what you're trying to do, like Ipsita was saying, it's not as though everything has changed. There is a lot still which is the way it was earlier. What are we trying to do over here? Basically, what we are trying to do is to infuse things with AI in order to improve the capability of that particular initiative or that particular solution. Okay, now in order to do this, first and foremost, you yourself need to be convinced that this is the right way to go. And the best way for us to do that is to get the teams themselves to start using the various solutions that we have to see how it is helping you. For instance, say I have a team of 3 people that does market intelligence. Now, market intelligence obviously means a lot of research, a lot of thinking. You have to also analyze. You have to put your own skills into it. Earlier, normally, if you'd ask them to produce a report, it would take them 3 to 4 hours. Today, because you have AI that does all of the research and brings everything together for you, you only have to add on your experience to it. The matter can be done in 30 minutes. So whereas earlier, only very large accounts could be handled by these people, today, they're not only covering all accounts in India, but because now our remit has also extended to ASEAN, it's covering all of my ASEAN accounts as well. So basically, again, what are we trying to say? We are trying to say that AI will give you added capability. It is not something that's going to, replace you. It's not something that's substituting you, but it's going to enable you to do things that you never could get done properly because it's adding to that capability of yours. So in a company like ours, once you are able to showcase to the employees that this is what AI brings and this is why you need to take it out to your customers and showcase it to them as to how it can make their lives easier, their lives richer. After that, actually, the transformation is not too difficult. Because then, as I said, get them curious. Once they become curious, they do their enablements, they do their learning, they actually start experimenting. All of that evolution, as we say, the upskilling, as we say, it happens once you get them off the anxious track and onto the curious track.
But do you see an intensified competition, perhaps, in the SaaS space because of this?
See, competition has definitely intensified because there are so many newer companies that are coming in. Not only that, if you look at OpenAI, if you look at Anthropic, all of them now are also getting into the space of actually implementing, okay, which they were not earlier. Earlier, they were only creating the tools. Now they believe they can also go and implement. So it is a fact that competition has intensified. Does that mean that SaaS companies don't have a place? No, it does not. Because AI is still a tool. It still needs to be work in a context. It needs to actually get the intelligence out of the workflows. It still needs to have a UI UX. So if you look at the whole stack, it is still required. On its own, an LLM can never do anything which is contextual, especially in the case of an enterprise. Plus, in an enterprise, you need the kind of security and the kind of compliance, auditability, observability. These are things that only can be managed if you have the whole stack. And for that, again, the SaaS platform is still important for that.
Sure.
Ipsita, I would just like to add a bit to that, what Arundhati spoke about, that if you look at, there was a study done by a host of researchers across US universities, the top universities, Northeastern, Harvard, etc. And what they found was, this is a paper called Agents of Chaos, that what happens if you let AI loose within enterprises. And they can do anything from, obviously security breaches to wiping out databases and systems and lying. So they are worse than your worst employee because they will say, we have done so-and-so without doing that. And, the level of major problems were, I think, 10 or 11. So it is, no CTO or CEO is going to hand over the keys, in a sense, to AI without the intermediation of a
Devina, picking up from there, actually, interestingly, even if you're just looking at the IT services companies, right, though the AI annualized revenues are being spoken about and shown in their papers, but then you're not seeing that in the margins, and there's also AI deflation that is, finally companies are talking about it. Given that, how much of an incremental value do you see this bringing into companies in terms of their own valuation and having an impact on the stock price? If we are to say any of the Indian listed companies, are they going to get the AI premium even if they're adopting AI very aggressively?
I think the first question, should any company have an AI premium? I mean, it is not just about India. So globally, this whole story has been sold that AI is the thing, and Indian stock market and Indian IT services companies are not. India doesn't have an innovation story, if you want to use consultant speak, or India doesn't have an AI story, and that's why Indian market is not doing well. But that's not the truth, because if you see if you look at what were called the Magnificent Seven in the US, which is the 7 major tech stocks, Meta, Nvidia, Google, Apple, Amazon, Tesla, etc. That story had started unwinding in 2025 itself. Only 2 of those companies outperformed the S&P in 2025. In 2026, 3 or 4 are down for the year. Nvidia now in terms of PE valuations is back to 2019 levels. So, I mean, people think the story is, investing is very easy, that you buy the 7 stocks, you know the names of, okay, now that story is over, let's move to semiconductors. Now, semiconductors is an industry we have followed, we've been following, I mean, we've had our global research since 1999. So, we've followed all these companies from TSMC and Samsung to Micron, Nvidia, AMD, Intel, etc. for that long. And what people don't realize is that it's an extremely volatile, extremely cyclical sector. So again, these thumb rules of offering global products, doing just the obvious stuff doesn't work, because see, for one thing, semiconductor is extremely capital intensive, and you are supplying what are capital assets for someone else. So that's inherent volatility in that, because if you are selling, let us say, toothpaste or soap, if you are selling 500 million next year, it's not going to go to 100 million. It will be plus minus from that 500. But this, you start from zero every year. This year, the AI investment by the mega scalers is almost $1 trillion. I mean, there are estimates from 800 billion to $1 trillion. 2 years ago, these very same companies' total capital expenditure was $150 billion. So 2 years later, will they be spending so much? So the big question mark to my mind in this whole AI story is that it may be a transformational technology, but I can list out almost every transformational technology in human history, from railroads to automobiles, aviation, to internet, which has been a graveyard of companies, because you don't make return on capital on the amount of capital you put in.
Interesting. I don't think Ipsita perhaps will agree with that, given on the hardware part of the story, Ipsita. The push of AI integration into the hardware layer, I mean, in terms of acceptance, want to understand from you, how's the market sort of perceiving, let's say, an AI-enabled, AI laptops, and the future of AI integration into the hardware? Where do you see the story going?
So the concept of the hardware is that it needs to be the platform on which whatever anybody needs to be able to do, they can do. And with the requirement for much, much higher processing power and computing power, you need your devices to match up to the kind of requirements around AI that companies are building up. So the hardware industry actually is in a good place, because it gets to be the platform, and when you're the platform, whatever anybody's doing on your platform is good for you. Our focus has been on driving this idea of having a hybrid model for India, because we need to think about inclusive AI. And we have taken the stance that we want to make sure AI is available for everyone in the country. And that means we're going to have to find cheaper ways to keep AI. With more sovereignty and more geopolitical issues around the world, the idea of keeping data secure and keeping data locally requires the ability to put what we call AI on the edge, which means on your own computing devices, have enough power to be a mini server just within yourself. We are doing things like powering labs in government schools that require those high computing capabilities, because otherwise, how do you teach a middle school or high school child in outside of our metros what AI can do for them, right? And eventually,
Sure.
we'll also be using that to customize learning for children. So high computing power is going to be really important.
Sure. We are running short on time, so very quickly from each one of you, do you believe AI has the ability to, bridge the gender gap in terms of adoption or, better gender parity when it comes to employment in India?
On the gender gap, I think AI definitely will help. Again, because I go back to the first theme that I said, which is democratization of IT. It has never happened the way it is happening now. It provides you with information, it provides you with training, it provides you with whatever you want, as long as you have access to it. The access problem is still not completely solved. Because if you're looking at, the high-end smartphones, etc., how many women have it, especially across the entire spectrum, meaning in the rural areas, etc., is still a question. But once that piece is solved, I think it will definitely help in closing down the gender gap.
Ipsita, quickly. 10
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Gender inclusiveness is only going to be as good as the data AI gets access to, because AI functions on the data that's available. And for everything we do today, even the medicines we take, we are actually living with decisions made based largely on data on men and largely data based on Western men. So we need to be aware of this. And in inclusivity, we have to think about ways in which we bring data in. And for this, we have to think about things like digitizing stacks and stacks of paper that exist across tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural, because that gives us a lot more information, for example, on health. Health histories of people that are not the wealthiest people in the country, right?
Sure.
And the last thing I'd say is AI allows us to, will allow us to remove gender bias from things like hiring, from things like investing, if we use the systems correctly. So like everything in the world, if you use it for good, you will get good. If you use it for bad, you will get bad.
Sure. Devina?
I think the risks are greater for kind of evening out the gender bias because most of these large language models have been trained on tons of data, which includes a lot of junk data. So they actually amplify gender bias, they amplify race bias, they amplify all of those biases rather than reducing it. So, I mean, all data, all studies show that they, give resumes with exactly the same thing with the name of a man and a woman, and it will prefer the man because that's the data it's been trained on. So we need to be very careful, and it's a black box, so you don't know this is what is happening, and people are relying more and more on these systems. So, that to me is a big, big danger. And yes, also, I mean, the fact is that at least in India, there are all this talk of that don't give mobile phones to women. So whether they get the access also to what is available.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time.